everybody. Welcome back to your Full Crew podcast. This is the Full Tilt Tech Industry Leadership Talks. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. This week we have with us another incredible guest, Jonathan Rupprecht. Most of you probably know him, but if you don't, he is not only a renowned attorney, aviation focused, but also a crewed and Part 107 pilot. So we are so excited to have Jonathan on the show and for Rupprecht Law to be one of our sponsors for the crew and the tilt. So welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, Jonathan, you picked a really interesting theme for this show, which is be prepared. So tell us why you picked that and what it means to you.
My background as in the Boy Scouts, eventually getting an Eagle, and then also transitioning after that to when I was flight instructing. And when I was in my flight instructor training, my flight instructor, he was an Air Force colonel fighter pilot. He'd been doing that for cajillion years. He just constantly drilled into my head, be prepared in regards to always pre-flight planning and doing everything. And so that kind of really set in my mind the concept of being prepared for pretty much whatever you do.
Well, it applies not only to being a Boy Scout, or as your one mentor kind of alluded to, being in the military, but just in life in general, right? And certainly to being an attorney in the courtroom, I can relate to that completely. So let's kind of take it back to the beginning, because you alluded a little bit to your time as a Boy Scout, but tell us a little bit, to the extent you're comfortable, where you're from, a little bit about your upbringing, Jonathan.
Sure, yeah. I was born and raised in the South Florida area, and so I spent my time down here, went to law school down here, did all my flight instructing down here. Everything's been down here. And so originally, kind of leading up to Boy Scouts, I joined Boy Scouts, and then did all the merit badges, the camping, all of that, and then eventually went on to obtaining my Eagle. How I ended up doing my Eagle Scout project was I wanted to do something that was useful. And so I was actually, so to kind of give you an idea of how this started. So I was homeschooled, and I started college around, I think I was 16. And so I was in class, and it was in Spanish class actually. And there was a cop in there that literally said that there was having a hard time actually interacting with somebody and speaking Spanish, or because some people speak Spanish, some people speak different dialects of certain Indian languages in South America. And so he was having some difficulty actually communicating with him, and he expressed basically the point that he was getting ready to draw the gun on the guy because the guy was kind of fidgeting, putting his hand in his pockets, and he was having difficulty communicating. And from that, then I was like, well, I should come up with some translation cards and issue them to the police departments. So I ended up finding some it was Creole, Spanish, and 2 dialects of Mayan. And I found translators, and we put together cards, we fundraised it, and then I actually issued it to 3 different police departments. And then that was me at the police station, literally kind of training them on how to use those cards, kind of get a situation quickly under control, like put down the gun, we're here to help you, do you have any family around, kind of like your top 10 most important kind of questions. And we surveyed the different police officers and found out what are the 10 things you really want, and they gave us the 10, and we got them translations, we got the cards issued.
Well, I can see how this theme of being prepared started very early in your life, and certainly how your time in the Boy Scouts not only inspired you to be prepared and to prepare others, like you said, this police department, but also maybe sparked some interest in the law for you, because Jonathan, I almost laughed out loud when I saw that picture, because it has a little traffic court sign above your head, and it's like misdemeanor court and had a date or something. So there you were early on in your life, training law enforcement about the right thing to do. That's so cool. Did that actually spark some interest for you in the law and in law enforcement in particular?
Actually, no, not really. So what ended up happening is I started flying. So kind of after Boy Scouts, then I started flying. Started when I was 18, became a commercial pilot and flight instructor when I was 20. So that was a long time ago. This is what, 07, 08, when I became a flight instructor. And so that time of life was was really fun running around flying. And it wasn't the law actually came about because when the economy crashed back in was it '08, there was no more work. All the pilots were getting laid off. And
And
so
you were just then, you know, a pilot. You were a burgeoning, I mean, you're a flight instructor at this point. Yeah.
right, well, right. So pilots have this like very unique skill set that does not translate well over into many other areas. I mean, I guess I could do meteorology and risk assessments, but it's kind of you're kind of useless for many other tasks. So when there was no more work to be found because airlines were laying off, nobody was flying, nobody was going to flight school to train to go to the airlines. So the only job I could actually find was as a security guard because I was like, look, I gotta make money. Like, okay, I guess I'm going. It's a great humbling situation. I gotta be content. Let's do the security guard job. So when I'm getting hired, I told them I was a pilot, and they're like, wow, that's awesome. We just hired 2 pilots from Spirit Airlines last week, and I'm like, you just picked up 3 commercial pilots,
Wow.
and that's when I was like, I need to figure out another industry.
Holy
when
snipes, Jonathan, that's like reverso world right now. They can't get enough pilots, right, as we speak. But I want to back up for a second because I think we have a really cool picture of you in your pilot outfit in your early career. So here you are. Tell us a little bit about this picture. And you went right from college, or you were still in college when you got your pilot's license and started teaching, or how did that work exactly?
Yeah, I started flying when I was 18 and then working all my way through the different ratings and everything. So I became when I was around, I think a commercial pilot when I was like 19, and then shortly after I became a flight instructor when I was around like 20, and then went straight into flight instructor. They needed pilots so bad back then. They were literally calling me saying, "We already have your students assigned to you. Can you please get your flight instructor certificate as fast as possible?" I'm like,
Wow.
okay. So
And then it bottomed out, and then you were looking around like, what's next for me? So what made you think, hey, what about law school? I mean, you were like a security guard at this point, right?
well, right. I at that point I was like, okay, the if you have great seniority for certain jobs and certain type ratings and stuff, yeah, it's great. But it was constantly boom and bust, where you're like, you and all your buddies are like flying like mad. Everybody's got a great job, making money. And then boom, nobody's got anything. People are getting laid off. And then you're like, what in the world? This is so catastrophic. This up and down, up, down. And so my mother-in-law actually recommended, she's like, have you thought about law school? And I was like, what? And so I started searching around, and then I actually ended up going to Florida International University, which is down in Miami. So
Hmm.
that's how I kind of transitioned into that. I applied, and they actually gave me money to go. I was like, okay, I guess that was an easy button. Like all
Yeah.
no one else was giving me money. They're like, yeah, we'll have you, and I'm like, okay. So I ended up going to law school down in FIU. So kind of how that period of life went was that was an extremely stressful period of life because it was law
Yes.
school. I was interning with 2 judges at the Miami courthouse because my philosophy is primarily get as much experience as possible.
Right.
Law school really doesn't teach you anything that's actually kind of useful. So I was in the courthouse almost about 3 to 4 days per week with these judges in chambers, kind of working on different things, watching trials, doing all that, going to school at night, and flight instructing at that time. I also taught wilderness survival on the side there, and my wife and I, we had a Lego robotics business. So we were doing Lego robotics, and, so that was that. And then I did my CFII while in law school. That was the most crazy thing I've ever done. That was just insane amounts of studying and working.
Yeah,
And
well, holy shnikes, Jonathan. So you were homeschooled, you basically graduate high school early at the age of 16, you roll into college, then you roll through all of these different flight instructor level or certifications as a pilot certifications, become a flight instructor. then a security guard, and then bam, law school plus 50 other things. I mean, my head is just spinning right now trying to keep up. And, your theme is be prepared. I feel like you've prepared yourself for almost anything that can come your way, including wilderness survival. So that's unbelievable. I want to ask you a question though, during all of this time, right? Like, so pick an era, whether it was, early childhood, throughout your education, maybe early career, before law school. Are there any mentors that stand out in your mind that kind of, influenced this whole mindset you have about being prepared? You kind of alluded to an Air Force pilot earlier in your life, and also just the Boy Scouts in general, but either one of them or somebody else. And if so, kind of, was there like a saying, something that they said to you that stuck in your mind that's kind of relates to this be prepared idea?
No, I guess that's the synthesis of all, or boiled down, Twitterized version of kind of everything they taught about being prepared, right? So being
Right.
prepared in different kind of environments, right? So, I mean, you're doing all the different merit badges. I did lifeguard training. You're always constantly looking out for risk and problems that are going to break out. And so you're always trying to identify those and then mitigate those things. And then you get over to aviation and it's like the very similar concept, just kind of like more three-dimensional. So,
Right. It is.
and then it was just constantly that. And then also I did my instrument commercial and my CFI with my with that Air Force colonel. So he was just constantly just drilling into my head all sorts of, well, what if they do this? Well, what if they do that? You know what's going to happen here? You know what's going to happen there? And it was constantly making you think about what could happen and what you could do to prepare and kind of prevent that. What could you do to front load? And I mean, especially when you're flying in an IFR environment with a very fast aircraft, you really have to know what you're doing, and you have to be able to kind of think a couple steps ahead. If you're thinking here and now, you're behind the eight ball. You have a really bad problem. You should be a couple steps out ahead of wherever you need to be. And so that was just constantly drilled into my head, especially from doing instrument training, where we were flying many hours by instruments only, all over the place. And my instructor was constantly always having me do stuff that was like really crazy, because his philosophy was primarily take me way beyond what I was normally willing to kind of comfortably go, so as
Right.
to have experience, going flying in extremely horrible windy weather. And then I got used to it. Other people were scared to fly in really windy weather, and I was used to it because my instructor took me out to pick the worst runway at the worst airport, and we're going to fly for an hour landing with insane crosswinds. Or we're going to do a no gyro approach, precision airport approach, using just radios and literally a turn coordinator and a compass. Yeah, that was a little like overwhelming for your mental capabilities. You're like, like turn left, turn right, turn right. And they basically guide you down. It's if your gyros go out, that's your fallback, is a compass and a turn coordinator that's operated electrically. And they just talk you down into the runway, and you're like, I did one of those. That was, and
Well,
you know,
it was all about being prepared. And honestly, I'm going to very respectfully, Jonathan, God forbid that I disagree with the guest, but I'm going to disagree with you. I feel like that what you're telling me, and just my very super uber limited experience, just recently taking the Part 107 test and my time in the Air Force working with pilots, I disagree that that pilot training, didn't really translate to other things, because what I just heard you say is I had to evaluate risk. I had to be two steps ahead of, what could happen. And I feel like that translates directly into law school and into the courtroom and into the legal arena for sure, and kind of into life. Like, I feel like a lot of the things also that I learned in law school translate more largely into life and leadership. But I'm not going to quibble with you there. I just feel like this idea of assessing risk, being hyper prepared, and being able to think two steps ahead, like either what's the other guy gonna do, or what's the unknown X factor that can creep into this scenario and derail what I'm trying to achieve. Like, I think all of that, definitely makes you prepare. And the more prepared, I always tell people this, Jonathan, I think you would agree. I'm sure you've worked with other counsel, other people. especially on the legal side. I always, and there's all these people, right? These, not a ton, but there's people that have some natural talent, right? They could just get up and yammer and convince people of something. And that's what advocacy is about. But I'll tell you, and I would tell these people, you know, I will take the person any day that's going to put the work in, because they're going to beat you every time, you know, the people that are prepared. So I think this idea of being prepared is so key. And I love how you said this is like a Twitterized version of everything I learned in my life. I think that's awesome. And I think we have a picture of you from your law school time. Let's see if we can pop that up. Here we go. So tell us a little bit about this one.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I don't appear to ever age. I should go on like some type of like facial lotion commercial. And be like, age, right? So actually, prior to going here, I mean, some formative events of my life, because you were kind of asking questions like who's
Yeah.
actually changed your life. I
Yes.
think there's kind of like backing up what has actually influenced my life. So, I mean, uh, I would say from the be prepared kind of scenario,
Yeah.
you know, I have a dead man's signature in my logbook right now. You know, and then a lot of people kind of go like, well, what do you mean? Like one of the flight instructors that did a stage check on me with a wife and kid literally was stupid one day and flew low and slow with 3 other pilots in an aircraft and died. Just
Oh,
stupidity. And so when
gosh.
you're like, it's stuff like that. And when you were flying, you had constant, I mean, you mess up in a courtroom. I mean, yeah, there's some serious mess ups that you could kind of do, but like how bad? Like when flying, like you don't really have like lesser goof ups than like, you know, potentially like serious like dollar amount or damage kind of situations, right? We don't really have like
Yeah.
a mid-air collisions and stuff due to like a stupid air traffic controller. Like literally one time I remember an air traffic controller gave us the wrong vector and then messed up, and then we gave them a position report and they're like, wait, say again. And then they're like, oh, Pilatus 12 o'clock, half a mile. I look up and this Pilatus is like right at me, and we quickly I'm like, hey, is there like a smudge on the window right there? I didn't see that before. He's like, no, I'm not seeing it. I'm like, I, there's a smudge on that window. Like, I didn't see that before. I'm like, I think that smudge is growing. Poof, you know, oil line blows up. The entire window is covered in oil. I think on the ground. I literally like we were just happened to be near an airport. You know, jumped over and started making calls and had to literally stick my head out the window as oil's going on it and everything. And then we
Oh
literally
my.
landed, and it was funny. One of my classmates from school was like getting ready to take off, and he was like, "What's this Yahoo doing coming in at like psychotic speed?" You know, running. You know, then he like sees the thing covered in oil, and he's like, "I understand. He's trying to get on the ground before the engine seizes up."
Oh
So
my
yeah,
gosh.
had actually, so that's scary. What's more scary is a hydraulic brake failure below at low speed when you're landing. So you're typically starting to brake, and then you don't have enough airspeed to have enough control, just with your ailerons and rudder and everything. So we had a hydraulic failure, and literally it one worked, the other one didn't, and I'm doing like 90 degrees off the other end of the runway, and I couldn't control the thing, and I was like on a
Oh my
roller coaster
God.
ride I want to be on, and that was the most scary one because everything else you could control the situation.
Yeah.
That one I control is like, well, we're along for the ride, you know. So, um,
Wow.
all of that, and then going to law school. So, that picture there in law school is actually Alito is in the background. The dean of the law school was the clerk, used to be the clerk for Alito. So we had Alito come and speak. And what was interesting was the case that they argued at oral arguments there, it was like they did a mock oral arguments, was the Carpenter case. And I still remember
Ah,
just yeah, and it was or Jones or Carpenter, was one of those. And the one that was authored by Alito. So some poor law student had to argue against the opinion that Alito wrote to Alito himself. And I was like, man,
oh,
I,
that's rough.
I just,
Wow.
goodness, like, you know, how do you, the opinion author was not enlightened like ourselves. You know, I mean, yeah, you pretty much, I still remember that distinctly. And then when we were doing the race day quads case, I just kept thinking back to the poor guy. I'm like, man, that guy was grilled. So yeah,
Yeah.
went to law school and was flight instructing while I was in law school, going to school at night. And then it was in my last year of law school, I took a class and it was international comparative law. I had to write a paper on comparing two forms of law and kind of making an analysis on it. So I compared the Japanese drone integration to the United States drone integration because we have a very similar kind of like legal structure, especially since World War II. And primarily did a whole paper on that because I was like, I'm going to get a job trying to, turn this paper into almost like a mini book. And I ended up doing that. I published that as a book. And I've been making money off that since law school, actually. And so then what happened after that was I was at a University of Miami put on like a robotics law conference. I just happened to go over and I ran into this lady and I started chatting with her, and she was the editor for this American Bar Association book on unmanned aircraft law. And I was like, really, you're doing that? I'm like, hey, and I pitched her. I'm like, well, why don't you have me write? Like, I'm a pilot, and here's my manuscript, the book I pretty much just did on the Japanese drone integration. I'm very familiar with the U.S. integration. And she was like, sure. So, I mean, this is why I'm in law school doing this. So basically wrote on the history of unmanned aircraft. And by God's grace, she told me to write on the FAA rulemaking process. Somehow now I'm literally involved in every rulemaking litigation case, it seemed like, with the drones after that. So I kind of was familiar with the situation from all of that. Later on, went and once I took the bar, passed first time. Then I was actually trying to be a prosecutor, and they literally gave me an interview. And everything was, I was doing CLI, so I was going to the courthouse, doing prosecutions under the supervision of attorney. I was like, this is great. But then they had a hiring freeze right after they gave me the interview and everything.
Oh my gosh, that seems to be also a theme in your life.
I'm like, why can't you just like wait a week, man? Just can you give me 1 week and I'll be right? So and then I mean I'm married and have, a kid at that time, so I'm like, well, gotta put food on the table. So I ended up actually taking a job as a criminal defense attorney, since I kind of knew that already. Literally on the other side with the same people I was like working with, like, how many weeks later. So it was really enjoyable because like, oh yeah, I'm friends with the prosecutor. Like we used to work together. I'm friends with him, and I know the judges and everybody. And so, and then I did that. And then, so I worked in a criminal defense law firm. And then what ended up happening is my boss literally took me in one day on Friday and he's like, hey, I can't afford you anymore. I'm gonna have to let you go. And I'm like,
oh my gosh, this is on the criminal defense side?
Yeah, on the criminal defense side. Okay. And then that was I was at October 2014. And if you remember the section 333 exemptions, which are done according to a rulemaking process, which I was right, that came out, it was like the month prior. So then I talked to people and they were like, hey, start your firm. I'm like, okay. So I started it in January 2015. And then a little bit later on, the FAA decided to do that whole registration debacle where they're like, oh, let's just make the we're kush, and then Taylor calls me because I took a large section from that chapter that I had written for the ABA and then put it online.
That's the American Bar Association, for those that don't know.
Right. And then kind of where everybody started kind of realizing, that this was illegal. And then I guess that's kind of how people started knowing me. Then John Taylor actually gave me a call, and he was like, yeah, I'm suing. And, you're interested? And it's funny because I'm like, well, when? He's like, tomorrow. I'm like, okay, I'm like, so I literally get off the phone. I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I could give my wife a call. And I was like, okay, we got to be up all night. We're typing this out. So we were like, he and I were up all night. We're like, yeah, let's do this, And I don't know, I passed out around like 3 a.m. and stuff. And then he filed the very next day. This was around, was it New Year's or Christmas or something? It was like, they did it tactically. That FAA's tactical at trying to like dump.
Almost all the rules seem to come out like on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, something like this. Yeah, I don't know how tactical it is, if it's just like that's when things get done, but usually no one's in the office. So like, around those times, I worked in the federal government for 28 years. So like, I always found that to be interesting. But for those that, just to catch people up, I want to say a couple things. Number one, we've got some folks out in the chat, Jonathan, that are that are cheering you on here. So Kevin Sanders is saying he's incredibly happy to tune in to see the ultimate industry influencer. I guess that's me. Conversing with the ultimate industry big legal brain, that would be you. And that he thinks you have Dick Clark's youth disease. So that's pretty funny. Dick Clark never aged. And then Chris Geneseth has a question, but I might defer the question, but I will, he says, thank you. First of all, thank you for the work you do. He wants a perspective on FAA's 333 to 107 to what, the future holds and what we need to do as a community to combat bad policies and regulations. So I don't know if you want to answer that now or hold on that, but let's hold that for 1 second, just 1 second. And I want to catch everybody up because what Jonathan's alluding to here is the Taylor v. Huerta case. It was the registration rule case. And if y'all recall, Congress at some point, I think in one of those FAA reauthorization acts, had kind of warned the FAA, like, you don't have authority to govern model aircraft, right? It was around that the 333. It was around that section in whatever authorization that was. And then the FAA put out a registration rule requiring all hobbyists, recreation modelists to register their drones. And this is the case Jonathan's talking about, where he and John Taylor were up till 3 a.m. typing this, and ultimately were successful. So they prevailed in that case. The rule was ultimately struck down, and Congress had to go back after the fact and fix, kind of frankly, the mess in a way that they created. There's a lot of blame to go around here, but they put the initial guidance out in the law that the FAA should not be messing with the hobbyists, and then they changed their mind and did the small the recreational drone rules, what we call it now, all in response to what Jonathan is talking about. So Jonathan, pretty bold here. I mean, you've been through so many things in your life. I don't know what, it's like, to use your comment, it's almost like everything was like the Twitterized version of making you who you are today, to like kind of culminate in that one really big case that I think, kind of put your name on the map, if you will, as an attorney, especially in the drone world. Obviously a large hobbyist recreation group of folks out there that, kind of cheer you on in the work that you do. And that was the first win for that community. So yeah, as you were doing all of these things, and as you look back, you got some great guidance along the way. Do you have any tips to young people out there, or really, you don't have to be young, right? People pivot at all different ages in their lives and in their careers. Do you have any tips or advice that you would give to people, either along the lines of being prepared or otherwise, as they look around and decide what it is they want to do with their lives?
Yeah, I mean, one thing would be if you're going to do something education-wise, try to get through as quickly and as low cost as possible, because it's really bad to go and start out with a lot of debt. That's a really important point right there. I think a lot of people go and just pile on tons of debt, and I'm like, why? Like, so I graduated law school with no debt. I got scholarships through undergrad, and I got some money that was given to me just it was just given to me literally just because I applied to go to FIU. So, and then I worked, so I graduated no debt. So the ability to be flexible was super easy, because I have no overhead from expensive tuitions I had to pay for a degree years back, right? I think that's probably one super important one right there, because I think also another thing, people prioritize some of this education, but education doesn't really matter as much as experience. So
it's almost like a square. You have to check the square, right, in our society in some respects, right? Like, I'm listening to you, Jonathan. I'm hearing my middle son, like, he says the exact same thing. He is trying to just blow through school as soon as possible. He's just like, this is crazy. I know more than these teachers. He's getting like 5. He's doing physical, kind of training, and he's getting like all these certifications on his own time while he's going to school. He's like, yeah, it's not even hard. Like, I'm just getting these on the side. So I feel like you and he have a lot in common, honestly.
Well,
but it's good advice, because You know, I feel like, especially today, I don't think school is what it used to be. I mean,
Right.
I'm
Well,
just going to say it. Yeah, college for sure
right.
after
Yeah.
COVID.
There's it's a lot of money for not a lot. It's a lot of bang for, it's very little bang for a really large buck.
I
And,
agree.
and so you kind of really have to look at it, from that analysis. And how quickly can you just get through with homeschooling? I mean, a lot of us started college early. I mean, I had a friend start when he was like 14.
Wow.
It's not uncommon to have homeschoolers start graduating high school with their bachelor's at the same time, because the idea is like bachelor's really are nothing more than the high school education nowadays, right? You have to go and get a master's and a doctorate. So as fast as you can, get to your master's and doctorate. So let's just skip high school, go to college, and just get through it as fast as possible, or unless you're going to go to like a trade school or something like that. So I mean, I think that's a really big one right there, being prepared. Always constantly, thinking out what is going to happen or potentially could happen, and then keeping yourself loosey goosey for whatever may happen, because you may find yourself randomly one day with your boss lets you go, and you're like, well, I have to pivot now to
Do
something different.
something else. Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I was going to say, all those experience you've gathered and all the different things you've done have, I think, given you that ability to be flexible. And I think that maybe dovetails in what you're saying, Jonathan, about not only getting through school as quick as possible, if it is something that's just kind of like that square to check. Part of that is gathering up as much of experience as possible. I mean, you said it indirectly, but I think that was maybe your point number two, is like, get out there and do stuff.
Right. Yeah. Like literally. So like, I used to save up my absences at school so I could just go do things with them. And, so I remember distinctly, like how did you get into drones and stuff, like prior to, like, how'd you pick the drone thing at the beginning? Well, literally what happened was the Federalist Society had, Don Shinneman. I don't know if anybody remembers him.
I
He was on,
remember, yes, Don Shinneman, yeah.
he came and spoke at my law school. So I literally skipped class, okay, to go to the talk, and then I literally had dinner with him afterwards and was
Wow.
chatting about, because so yeah, and then we and a little bit around that time frame, I also had my aviation law professor. He actually used to be the general counsel to Precision Hawk, actually,
Oh,
around that.
okay.
So that was kind of like all happening around the same time frame. And then I was like, hey, I should do this Japanese drone integration paper. And so that's, be prepared. Do you have enough absences saved up so you can skip class, so you can go to something that's actually important, meet people?
Yeah.
I was never judges. So one of my classmates used to be the editor of one of the really important business newspapers down here. And so I skipped class one day to go into this networking event, because that's where all the judges and attorneys were and the partners. So I'm like, yeah, which of these two is going to get me a job, right?
Yeah.
So they were taking pictures, and there's like a picture of me with all the judges. And yeah, he's the editor. So he, like, next day in class, he's like, yeah, man, I know where you were. I know why you were here last night. I was like, yeah, you caught me. There's a picture of me in the magazine. I was not there. I was networking. Because you don't know what the future holds. So I was interning with two judges in Miami, and watching all of the fireworks there in the courthouse, with all the different attorneys. And the Miami attorneys are definitely a interesting, unruly group of individuals compared to other attorneys in other places. Yeah,
Well,
that
you
was the.
clearly fit in, but I do want to get to Chris's question, and then we're going to talk about balance, because with all of these things that you've done, some of them simultaneously, like just thinking about your time in law school makes my head explode, because I went to law school. I know what it's like, and it is nothing like anything else anybody has ever experienced, unless you actually go to law school. Just throw that out there. But Chris asked for your perspective, if you're willing to give it, on, what does the community need to do to combat bad policies and regulations kind of going forward? You're an expert in the rulemaking process. You've been following this industry really since the beginning. You come with this crude aviation perspective, and so many other rich and rewarding experiences in your background. What would be, maybe let's just shorten this, because this could take all day, and I want to get to some other stuff. What would be the one thing that could be done to help combat future bad policies or regulations?
The number of primarily drone pilots that can vote need to primarily mobilize and start realizing that they need to start influencing their elected officials. And so you can influence via contacting your senators or congressmen, or by funding litigation and stuff like that. Unfortunately, like the Race Day Quads case, we were not successful, but it's hilarious. What's really interesting is about that case is the legal issues we actually raised. Some of them were actually never answered, especially the Fourth Amendment cases type of stuff. Yet it's hilarious because I'm like, it doesn't really change the fact that those points that we made, it didn't somehow like make them like go away. So that point, some of those same exact arguments are literally right now going into the other criminal case that I'm working on right now regarding use of some counter drone technology, which led to kind of the situation that my client's dealing with right now. And so it's like they're all coming back. They never went away. A lot of
you know what? It didn't go away at all. I mean, I think you saw the articles I wrote, Jonathan, because I had some quotes from you, and I coordinated those quotes with you and your team. But the door is wide open. I mean, basically what they took a really long time to take a really easy way out, and basically said this was a facial challenge. This wasn't as applied. And we will essentially punt this for now. And, when remote ID becomes effective and the right person comes forward and says, this violated my constitutional rights because it actually was applied to me and this is what happened to me, then they're like, then we can have something to cut our teeth on. So I don't feel like the fat lady has not sung, like everybody was like so rejoicing. And both you and I know that remote ID, right, it's not even implemented yet for the pilots. I mean, for the manufacturers, they kind of kicked the can a little bit, right? Like said, all right, we'll give you more a grace period for compliance at the OEM level. Like that was December. Have we seen any kind of enforcement actions for companies that are not baking in remote ID but still selling things? No, I don't think so. And then, again, what's this thing going to look like in September when all of a sudden all the pilots and law enforcement are magically supposed to be, using remote ID? Like, where is even the technology? I can probably tell you on my left hand how many companies are putting it out, and can law enforcement even afford it? So I think there's so many open questions on that. But what would be like your one, okay, so your one tip is get involved in your local communities. Go ahead.
Contact your senator and your congressman. So what happened was a couple months ago, I think a lot of people are actually answering things and talking about things they have actually no experience with. I mean, who's the guy that actually gets the phone calls when their drones are getting shot down and they're getting assaulted by people? That's me. I'm the one that actually deals with my clients actually getting assaulted and all that, not the FAA and DC and their little ivory towers that they don't actually do anything. They're non-operators. They're like posers, like, I'm going to be your drone buddy. Meanwhile, my clients get like assaulted with, with guns and stuff, or their drones actually shot down. Like, so my clients, from what I know, the drones getting shot down is like the #1 way they lose their drones. Not because they're an idiot and they crashed into a tree. Yet for some reason, the FAA thought, let's put the ground controller location on the ground. In their infinite wisdom, I mean, why don't we put the ground controller on at their location or at their home? And then they'll be like, whoa, that's scary. I'm like, yeah, you do it to these guys. So out of all that, because I just got tired of it, I actually started drafting a proposed law to give to basically the senators and congressmen. I was calling it the Drone Safety Act. I think I put it actually up on my website. I've just been a little busy in the meantime here. We had a family member die and all that stuff since then, so I was literally I was sidelined since then. But that law, that act, I put it out there, and it goes into actually trying to create a lot of fixes to the federal statutes so as to allow certain types of maybe counter UAS authorities, as well as de-preemption authorities that allows for a lawful use of certain things and arrest powers or whatever in certain confines. But for some reason, nobody's really picked that up. I know I've sent that out to a few people. They might have just probably been a little bit respectful and trying to be like, we don't want to steal your idea. But that's one thing I've been thinking about is like, hey, that Drone Safety Act on my website, somebody proposed that to their senator or congressman and say, hey, we agree with that. I don't care if you copy paste it and you take the credit for it.
Just put that on your website, and then they'll feel more comfortable doing that. I would see like not being comfortable copying and pasting stuff off a lawyer's website and using it, in my law if I was a senator or, in a state legislature or something. So
Right, but
no, I mean, if you let people know, and by the way, everybody, just real quick, we got to get the balance, my friend. We're not ending the show without that, and we also have a lightning round of 3 quick questions. Just a reminder, everybody, Jonathan will be on the Counter UAS panel for Law Tech Connect. So please come to that workshop at AUVSI Exponential on Monday, May 8th. It's going to be spectacular. He's also going to be at our Energy Edition in Houston, Texas with the Energy Drone Robotics Coalition on Monday, June 12th, a similar but very different panel. Honestly, it's a similar topic, but different panel. So please join us at both of these, and you can meet Jonathan in person. Jonathan, I got to ask you this question because I ask all of my guests. It's the toughest nut to crack in life. How do you maintain balance with everything you have going on between, your very high pressure law practice that, as a solo practitioner, with your own business, going up against, kind of the government oftentimes, you've got all these other things going on. How do you do it? What, any insights here?
yeah, I mean, for one, I have my own firm, so that makes it greatly much more simple from a planning standpoint, with onboarding certain projects and saying no to other projects. So that's one point. Two, when you own your own firm, you can fire clients that take up a lot of your time and that are difficult, right? So that's another thing. Like clients that are difficult, I fire them. And I also get paid up front. So that way I don't have to deal with any of that with cash flow. Like, you got a problem, well, pay me. Once you pay me 100% in full, then we'll deal with it. Because you don't want to, when I guess there's not a problem, because at the end of the day, attorney that fixes problems, not goes and plays collections with somebody who can't pay. So I understand at the same time there are people that cannot afford to pay, and at times I have helped individuals. And, like look at the Taylor case. I did that all pro bono. That was like a lot of time disappeared, and I helped people at times. Yeah. So I think those are some really important numbers. And now regarding balancing it with family life and stuff, what it would be very helpful there is you start picking hard numbers. So you stop working at certain times, right? You just stop. And that's it. Stuff will get done. Just stop working at that time. Don't let it kind of get scooch out. It's kind of like dropping water on the floor with the schedule, especially with a lawyer. It just kind of like spills out everywhere. It's never contained. Your work, like,
Right.
stop it. Just, okay, that time, you hit that time, just stop.
And
That's the thing.
you have a really fun hobby, Jonathan, and I think you alluded to it earlier with your wife doing Lego robotics. I think we have a couple pictures. In fact, here you are. I'm assuming this is your wedding cake with little Legos all around it. Is that right?
And it's like the Legos are literally building. Well, because
Oh, building the cake. That's so cute.
so I feel like I won I won like the 12-year-old boys, like every dream. Like, I got the girl with all the Legos. I was like,
There you
lottery.
go. That is
So
so cool.
so we have like a cajillion Legos. And so we ended up doing that. We built a cake, whatever, how many tiers. And then it's like all the little Lego guys are like building it. So there's like a little Lego guy like spackling it. There's the robotic crane like lifting up the chef with the loudspeaker. And so there's like a bunch of little intricacies to the whole thing. There's like a little story scenes. One's like they're cutting up the Lego bricks out of fondant. You can see them like cutting with like an axe, and then like
That
one's
is
like,
so,
oh,
that is so cool. I love it. I was telling our producer Goyo in the background here that the Lego annual convention or expo is coming to Colorado Springs this September. So maybe you guys come out. I get to see you again. But hey, we are at time, Jonathan. I know there's so much more we can talk about. Kevin Sanders has an amazing question about this new Florida law enforcement Chinese drone thing, but we just don't have time to go down that rabbit hole. So Kevin, you're at AVSI, come to Law Tech Connect. Kevin helped me a lot last year with that event, by the way. So I don't know if he'll be coming this year, but 3 quick questions. We're going to end the show. Ready, Jonathan? Our lightning round. Number
sure,
one, your favorite book.
Bible,
All right. Number 2, your hero.
Jesus.
Number 3, one thing you want to leave others with in closing from a leadership standpoint.
Be prepared. Whether
There you
time
go.
or something, be prepared.
All right, awesome. Hey, thank you so much. I knew this time was going to fly, and it really did. Really appreciate you, and thanks. Really looking forward to seeing you in Denver here soon.
Likewise.
All right, everybody, we are out here.